Welcome to Decoding Healthcare Research, a podcast by Agora Project. Join us as we delve into the behind-the-scenes world of groundbreaking research and the dynamic healthcare industry, interviewing top paper authors, engaging experts on industry-related topics, and exploring medical subjects that affect our daily lives. And now, your host, Dr. E.F. Rain.
Welcome to Decoding Healthcare Research. I'm your host, Efrain Riveros, Dr. E.F. Rain. Today, we will be discussing very important topics related to nutrition. We will talk about intermittent fasting, time-restricted eating, the effect of this on sleep, and some other nutritional aspects of relevance. To discuss this, we invited a very special guest, Dr. Krista Varady. She's a professor of nutrition at the University of Illinois in Chicago. She has more than 100 papers related to these topics, and she also has two very successful books, Every Other Day Diet and The Fastest Diet. Welcome, Dr. Varady.
Great, thanks for having me.
As an introduction, because it's a common theme in your publications that we are discussing today, what is non-alcoholic fatty liver disease?
Basically, a lot of people with obesity actually have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, even if they don't drink alcohol. It's basically the type of liver disease that occurs when, in the absence of excessive alcohol intake. And I believe at this point, they're estimating that anywhere from 30 to 60% of people with obesity actually have fatty liver. So it's something that's very prevalent, particularly in America today, just with the obesity epidemic. And then the problem with fatty liver disease is that it leads to insulin resistance, and then it can eventually turn into prediabetes and type 2 diabetes if it's not treated. And right now, the two first things that doctors do is basically have people do some type of like diet and exercise regimen to lose weight. And then that can reverse fatty liver disease just on its own, just from improving your lifestyle.
Yes, I see. So in the context of this fatty liver disease, what is the effect of diet, specifically alternate day fasting and time-restricted eating?
So I've been studying intermittent fasting for about 20 years now, mainly as like a weight loss intervention. And intermittent fasting is basically just a period of eating followed by a period of fasting. So pretty simple. There's two major types of intermittent fasting. One is called alternate day fasting, and the other one's called time-restricted eating. Alternate day fasting is when you basically fast every other day. So you have one day of just ad libitum eating. You do whatever you want. That's the feast day. And then you have something called a fast day where you eat about 500 calories or so, usually as like a lunch or a dinner. And then the diet just kind of flip-flops like that, like feast day, fast day, feast day, fast day. Some people find that a little hard. So there's also another type of intermittent fasting called time-restricted eating, which is, I think, a little easier to incorporate into the lifestyle. That one involves like shortening the window of time that you eat, usually to about 8 hours or so. So with that diet, if you pick an 8-hour window to eat, you would, kind of place that where you want in the day. But most people place it from like 12 to 8 p.m. just because they can still eat with their family for dinner and that type of thing. So you would basically fast with water up until 12, eat whatever you want and not calorie count up until 8 p.m. that day. And then you just fast from 8 p.m. until noon the next day. So time-restricted eating is basically a little bit of fasting every day, whereas alternate day fasting is you only fast every other day.
I assume then that the advantage of these diet methods is that you don't have to be obsessively counting calories?
Yeah, I think the main thing with, to be honest, alternate day fasting isn't super popular because it's hard for people to do 500 calories every other day. But time-restricted eating, we've run several studies in this area. We have one that was just a 12-month study that was published in Annals of Internal Medicine a couple months ago, showing that, people find it pretty easy to stick to. And the coolest part about it is that you don't have to count calories. So many previous diet interventions really required people to vigilantly monitor calorie intake and like MyFitnessPal or something like that. And people just get really burnt out of that. And they usually stop doing that after about a month or so. So with time restricted eating, as long as you're eating in that 8-hour window, you naturally cut out about 400 calories per day. So almost the same that you would if you were tracking calories. So it's kind of like a way of fooling the body into eating less food without having to do much work.
Going back to the study, what were your hypotheses, and tell us a little bit about the design of the trial.
So I have to say, I designed this. This was like an R01 grant from the NIH. So I designed this when I was just studying alternate day fasting, like 7 or 8 years ago, before I like shifted my attention to time restricted eating. So that's why this particular fatty liver study involves combining alternate day fasting with endurance exercise. And at the time, that was just the fasting regimen I was studying. So that's the one we decided to incorporate. And the purpose of it really was that no one had really combined fasting with exercise before. So we really wanted to see if this was just an alternative strategy. I don't think it's like better than calorie restriction, but all previous studies basically just combined calorie counting with exercise. So we thought, well, can people do alternate day fasting instead of the calorie counting and kind of see the same benefits?
Okay, what was your primary outcome then?
The primary outcome was liver fat. So we measured that using MRI PDFF.
And what did you find?
We found that, so just to kind of give you a brief overview of the study, we looked at basically alternate day fasting by itself, and then we looked at exercise by itself. It was a parallel arm design, randomized controlled trial. And then we also had a combination diet and exercise group, and then just a control group. And our subjects had obesity and they were diagnosed with fatty liver disease. So having NAFLD means that more than 5% of your liver by weight is fat. So we just made sure that we MRI scanned them when they came in to make sure that they had fatty liver. And then they followed these 4 different regimens. So they were randomized to those 4 groups for 3 months. And we found that basically the combination therapy, alternate day fasting plus endurance exercise, definitely had the best effects. Also, just to mention, the exercise was fairly intensive. It was endurance exercise, so people, like running on treadmills, that type of thing, or elliptical machines, and they had to do that 5 times a week for about 60 minutes at like 65 to 85% HR max. So kind of like moderate intensity. So I'd say it's like jogging kind of 5 times a week.
They did it from home?
Yeah, well, we supervised all the exercise. I've run a lot of lifestyle intervention studies, and with exercise, you really have to supervise them because you never know what people are doing. You like send them into the world and they say they're doing it. But so we had them come to the research center at first, but then COVID hit. So we started this study, I think it was January 2020. And then, March 2020, like the world shut down. So we did supervise them over Zoom. So we had to just watch them exercise from home. And then a lot of these people had like elliptical machines and that type of thing at home. If they didn't, we just had them do like Zumba classes on YouTube, like aerobics classes.
How did the groups do?
Pretty good. I'd say the combination therapy by far did the best. So that was the group that saw significant reductions in liver fat by about 5.5% versus controls. We also saw that group lowered their ALT levels and their body weight went down by about 5%, along with waist circumference and fat mass. And then they also saw some nice changes in glycemic control. So their insulin sensitivity went up as well. So we're pretty happy with it. But they started out, their liver fat at baseline was around 15%. And our goal was to treat fatty liver disease, which means that we wanted them to drop below that 5% threshold, but they didn't. They only dropped by about 5 or 6%, so down to 10. So I think Had we done the study longer, like instead of 3 months, done it up to 6 months, we could have potentially fully gotten rid of the fatty liver disease. That's something we need to test in future trials.
So you think there is a linear relationship between weight loss and the amount of fat in the liver?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's driven by the weight loss and then the reduction in visceral fat mass as well.
What about adherence to the regimen? Beyond the clinical trial, do you think that these strategies are easy to keep over time?
Yeah, that's a good question. So a lot of what we study is like adherence. So I study intermittent fasting, but what we're really looking for is like diets and lifestyle interventions people can stick to. I'd say, to be honest with you, alternate day fasting, like the adherence we got was pretty good, but it was a short study. So we asked them in the study to eat 600 calories every day on the fast day. And then we measured that using food records. And they ended up eating, I believe it was 670 calories. So right around there. So that was fine over 3 months. And then for exercise, they attended 4 out of 5 of those exercise sessions over Zoom. So it was pretty good. But would people do this long term? They might do the diet long term, but what I've seen with exercise adherence is it really goes down over time. Like asking people to exercise 5 times a week is a lot. And, people have busy lives, and whether or not they're going to do that long term, I don't know.
Okay, now I'm moving on to the next paper. This one was published in Nutrients, March 2023. And I understand that this is a secondary analysis. The title is Alternate Day Fasting Combined with Exercise, Effect on Sleep in Adults with Obesity and Non-Alcoholic Fatty Liver Disease. Can you tell us a little bit more about this second study?
Sure. Yeah. So we analyzed throughout the study, we also looked at sleep just as a confounding variable. And we used a bunch of questionnaires to evaluate sleep. So it wasn't like the gold standard where you use like an actigraph or anything like that or an in-house sleep study. But using questionnaires, we measured sleep duration, insomnia severity, and just overall sleep quality. But we found that none of that changed.
So, in your opinion, what is the connection between sleep and fatty liver?
Uh, I don't know if there's any direct connection. We just wanted to make sure that the fasting intervention was not like disrupting sleep. Because some people say when, if they're only eating 600 calories one day and say they eat that as a lunch, then that's a pretty long fasting period before they go to sleep. So they could maybe not be eating, for 10 hours before sleeping. So we were just a bit worried that that was leading to insomnia or problems going to sleep. Which could then affect weight loss. So weight loss and weight control is definitely very affected by people's sleep patterns and sleep quality. So we really looked at it more as a confounding variable. We weren't, our hypothesis was that basically, hopefully it wouldn't change. And it didn't.
Would it be safe to say that intermittent fasting is effective? And in addition to that, it doesn't affect sleep patterns, at least in terms of big variables?
We have basically a separate review article looking at a bunch of different types of intermittent fasting. It was published, I think it's 2021, also in Nutrients by our group. And we evaluate our studies and a bunch of other studies in this area. And we show that intermittent fasting generally doesn't impact sleep. But it's important to note that a lot of those previous studies were using those questionnaires instead of like ACT graphs, which is a more gold standard approach. So I think people are just worried that fasting will make people so hungry that they can't sleep, and that hasn't been shown. So basically, if a lot of people are sleeping around 6-7 hours at baseline, and we show that that doesn't change, and insomnia severity doesn't change, and sleep quality doesn't change.
Yeah, it could even go in the opposite direction, right? That the intermittent fasting actually helps patients to have better sleep.
That'd be great if it did. Like if people would, well, one of our hypotheses too with sleep was that some people with obesity have like gastric reflux, or they can't go to sleep because of like acid burning when they lie down right before they go to sleep because they ate something really late into the day. So we thought that, with fasting, you're definitely not eating for 4 to 5 hours, depending on what regimen you do, so that, everything from your GI is like cleared out. So hopefully that would improve gastric reflux maybe, and then help them sleep a little bit better. But we haven't measured that directly, but that was, just one of the hypotheses that maybe it would improve sleep, but we haven't seen that.
I see. So far we have been talking about alternate days fasting and the benefits based on your two initial papers. But I find intriguing the role of time-restricted eating that you deal with in the publication of the Annals of Internal Medicine 2023. The title of the paper is Time-Restricted Eating Without Calorie Counting for Weight Loss in a Racially Diverse Population. Can you tell us a little bit more about this study? What was your hypothesis?
So with this study, it was a 12-month study, which was parallel arm design randomized control trial. And we had 3 different groups. So time-restricted eating all food between 12 to 8 p.m. versus like traditional dieting, which is like daily calorie restriction, where people cut out around like 500 calories per day. And then versus a control group. And yeah, it was people with obesity, so no other health issues. And then they followed the diet for 12 months. And the primary outcome was body weight. So no other long-term studies have ever looked at whether or not time-restricted eating without calorie counting, if people could stick to it, and what happens with body weight. So that's the main reason why we did the study.
And what did you find?
We found that we were actually hoping that the time-restricted eating group would result in more weight loss, just because the diet's easier to do. Because again, you don't have to count calories all the time. But we didn't find that. We found that both the time-restricted eating group and the traditional calorie counting group lost the same amount of weight. So over a year, they lost about 5% weight. And they both had somewhat similar adherence, I guess you could say. They both ended up reducing their energy intake by about 400 calories per day. So a little different than what we thought would happen, but it was still nice to see that people could stick to the time-restricted eating diet, for the year. A lot of them really liked it and said that they would continue with that diet after the study was over. So that's pretty promising, because basically, for people to lose weight and keep it off, they have to keep on doing something. You can't just go back to, like, once you lost your weight, you can't go back to what you were doing before, because you'll just gain all the weight back. So we're just looking at long-term sustainable interventions for weight control. And I think time-restricted eating for certain people can help with that.
Do you think that this regimen of time-restricted eating has added benefits that amplify the overall effect?
I think so. This is in intermittent fasting, depends who you talk to. Like, I really think all the I think everything is driven by just people eating less, and then they end up losing weight for that reason. I don't think it's magical. It's just basically people are eating less, so they lose weight. But there's some people that think that ketones play into this, or that autophagy does, but we've measured ketones, and sure, they'll go up a little bit. Like, ketones tend to go up around 8 to 12 hours of fasting, but they don't go up to any like physiologically important levels until 3 to 5 days of fasting, like when you get full-blown ketosis. So I'm not super convinced that ketones play a major role here. And then with autophagy, that's something we still can't measure in humans just yet. We have like surrogate gene markers for that. But again, I think with autophagy, I don't think that even comes into play for a couple days as well. So honestly, I think it's all just weight loss.
Considering your vast experience in research, and especially the message conveyed by these important papers, you think there is room for changing or modifying the current guidelines in regards to diet, both in the US and Europe?
Yeah, that's our hope. So every time I write these grants, I'm like, the significance part, I'm like, I hope that this will, our goal is that it could be incorporated into dietary guidelines. So we're about to publish a study in about a week or so in JAMA Open that looks at the effect of time-restricted eating versus calorie restriction in people with type 2 diabetes. And people were always a little bit worried about implementing fasting in people with diabetes just because of like hypoglycemia and some other adverse events. But this study, which again will come out near the end of October, shows that it's completely safe. It helps people lower their A1C by almost a full point, and it helps them lower their body weight too by about 4 or 5%. So, and people can stick to it. They were wearing continuous glucose monitors. We didn't see any changes in hyperglycemia or hypoglycemia that was different than what we saw in the control group. So I think hopefully when there's more studies in specific population groups like type 2 diabetes, NAFLD, that type of thing, it can be incorporated into guidelines for those specific diseases. And I think we just need more like long-term randomized control trials, but that's definitely happening now because it's very, it's pretty popular and a lot of people are studying it. So hopefully in the next 5 or 10 years, we'll see it incorporated into guidelines more.
One aspect that has always called my attention is the fact that with the different types of diets, you see the effect at the beginning. Most of them are actually effective. But over time, that effect starts waning. So my question is, with this intermittent fasting, do you think there is an impact on the weight regain?
Well, so basically any diet intervention or even like the new GLP-1 agonists, like everyone loses weight over the first 6 months pretty nicely. And bigger people will continue to lose weight up until 12 months, if they have more fat mass to lose. I think adherence is the major thing. Like people just need to find something they can stick to long term, because a lot of people end up gaining weight back because they're just no longer sticking to the diet. So I think people just need to find something they can incorporate into their lifestyles and just, keep on doing that. But it's a really good question. That's like one of the major problems we have in obesity research. Like, how do we get people to stick to it so they can keep their weight under control long term? And I don't know the answer. We're trying to test out a bunch of different things, but works for some people, doesn't work for others. Maybe the GLP-1s will work, but the second people go off those, it's like a V-shaped curve of like people just immediately gain back all the weight because the appetite suppressing effects have, disappeared. So I don't know. Great question though.
To me, it's very clear the significant contribution of your papers and your research in general. My question to you is, what's coming next for your research group?
So we're studying, right now we're running 2 studies. We're looking at more like specific population groups, again, to target like dietary guidelines for different diseases. So currently we're looking at women with polycystic ovarian syndrome, to see if time-restricted eating can help them lose weight and basically improve androgen levels, which lead to polycystic ovarian syndrome. So that study kind of just started a couple of months ago, so we don't know exactly what's happening yet. And then we're also actually starting a study in type 1 diabetes right now. It will be basically the first study to see if fasting is safe in that group. And it's for people with type 1 diabetes and obesity, which is surprisingly about 50% of people with type 1 diabetes have overweight or obesity now. So just looking at a weight control regimen for them as well.
It sounds exciting. I'm looking forward to seeing the results of your next research. And I think with this, we are coming to an end. First of all, I want to thank you for being with us today. And to our audience, you will find it in the description of the video all the links to the papers of Dr. Varady and how to find her on social media. See you in the next episode.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up and share it with your friends and family. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. If you have any questions or thoughts about today's topic, we'd love to hear from you. Feel free to leave your comments down below. For more information and references related to today's discussion, you can find them in the video description below. We appreciate your support and look forward to having you back for our next episode.